You're listening to an episode recorded during the time Innovation Fuel was part of University Canada West. We are proud and grateful for the work we've done together, and we want to thank the university for being in our podcast. We are now excited to continue the journey of Innovation Fuel into its next chapter. Thanks for listening.
You're listening to Innovation Fuel, a business podcast by University Canada West.
Bringing you fantastic stories from accomplished entrepreneurs and key industry professionals. Let's explore the entrepreneurial world through local businesses and our university community. Hey, Gelareh, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you? How are you today?
I'm doing great. So what's going on today?
Dave, you know that I've been consultant for a long time, and it's really hard sometimes to convince people that, that you will going to face a lot of problem in near future. You need help. You need help now. But then people will come to you when they're facing a chaos. They actually, something bad happened to them and ask you to come to fix it. Because people are busy, people, companies are busy, are too busy to fix their problems or build infrastructure, build something for future. And they don't think it's urgent now, but it's important. Then they come with the chaos and problem as some incident happens, they go for consultant and they want to fix it. That is so hard for sometimes for consultants to fix it on that time anymore. It means that's a little bit too late.
You're all of a sudden you're faced with this problem. Then you turn to your consultant to go rescue you from this situation. And we hear this story a lot. And we hear this story a lot with even going from like really startups that are all of a sudden have a massive growth and everything gets disbobulated and they fall off the culture map and they fall off some other things out there. And then they run to these consultants for support thinking, hey, save me from all these problems.
And I think that we have a guest today that he can explain about challenges and the best time to come for consultant. Let's welcome John Kay, CEO of Realized Strategies. Hi, Dave. Hi, John. Welcome to another episode of Innovation Fuel.
Yes, welcome to another episode of Innovation Fuel brought to you by University Canada West. Yes, we have a special guest with us today. We're going to learn some very interesting things, maybe about the talent gap, maybe about corporate culture, some of the biggest challenges that we might face in Canada as we go to scale our businesses up. Without further ado, John, we got to know something about you. We got to know who is John Kay. So John, tell us a little bit about you.
Well, first of all, Dave and Gelareh, I'd just like to say thank you so much for the opportunity to be here with you today. It's really great. I know we've been trying for some time to tee this interview up. So really, really delighted that we have this opportunity to talk about what really is one of the most pressing issues facing our country and, honestly, a lot of the world today. So a little bit about me. Well, I'm kind of an odd story, guys. I often say that my career story is a bit like the Rubik's Cube and nobody's quite got the colors all lined up properly. Sometimes I'm referred to as an enigma. I am a chartered professional accountant who practices a little bit. I have a master's in business administration, and I have spent most of my career in a whole mix of roles in the private sector and in and out of the public sector. And along the way, I have spent probably way too much time sitting on boards of directors, mainly in nonprofit and cooperative sector organizations, a few private sector. And I've done that at the local level, the national level, and also internationally. So I'm kind of this odd mix of quant and accidental human resources or organizational design professional, and someone who spends a lot of time working with organizations that are community rooted and impact focused. And what's important for me is organizations that are also and understand that they are ultimately driven by people.
John, can you tell us a little bit more about the business you have created and what you do and who do you serve?
Great question, Dave. So Realized Strategies, we've been in existence for some time, going back about 20 years, but with today with a different brand name and a bit of a different focus. So first thing about us is we really work at the intersection point of people, culture, and organizational performance. Our view is that you can be a business or you can be a nonprofit organization and you can have the best services, you can have the best product, But if you don't have the people and you don't have the culture that enables those people, it really doesn't matter because you're probably headed for failure or stagnation. And especially for private sector companies, you're going to have your lunch eaten by those nimble startups that understand and care about people. So that's really where we focus our energy. And as I said a moment ago, Dave, we really focus on working with clients that are community rooted and impact focused. So what that means is we work with a very broad spectrum of organizations that all believe that they exist to create some positive impact in the world. We don't define what that means. It could be a social impact. So it could be a nonprofit organization that provides vital services to folks in the community who are marginalized. It could be a business that sells goods and services, but is very, very passionate about making an environmental difference, or anything along the way. So we work with a broad spectrum from nonprofits right through that kind of broad impact focus that, is becoming much more prevalent and we're much more aware of now. So that's the intersection point where we plug in. And a lot of the work we do, really kind of in two verticals is the way I'd put it, Dave. We do a lot of work in people and culture, particularly in helping organizations design and optimize to make sure that they've got the people, the right people and the right culture to enable them to perform at an optimal level and achieve that impact they want to achieve. We help hire talent. So we do have a small practice in executive search, which is mainly finding chief executive officers, executive directors, and so forth. And then we also have a second vertical, which is largely focused in strategy, risk, and governance. And it's really about auditing the environment in which organizations operate to say, do you have a strategy? Do you have a risk environment? Do you have a governance structure, if you have one, that are hindering or enabling you to achieve that impact and that performance that you want to achieve as an organization? And again, the through line in all of that for us is the people and the culture that are at the heart of that organization.
I have a question because you say that you were working for organization development and organization culture as a consultant. What is the biggest differences between companies that you say that there is most impact? They want to be impactful in their society or their environment. You can help them.
So what are the biggest differences, Gelareh? I read a really good article a couple of days ago, I think it was in the Atlantic, that talked about the sort of factory model of work versus the hunter-gatherer model. And what I mean by that is you come in at 9, you leave at 5. There's a very rigid set of structures and processes, and your job is to follow those things to the letter versus an organization where it's about results. It doesn't matter whether you work at from midnight to 4 in the morning or 8 to 5 or whatever. It really focuses on, do you have a culture where you can achieve what you need to achieve? You can deliver the results that the organization needs of you, but fundamentally you can feel like you can show up, you can live your values, you can manage all the pressures that we have as human beings in this crazy world that we live in. And by having that supportive culture, you are enabled and also challenged to deliver great performance. And you have a leadership that fundamentally cares about those kinds of things. We hear more and more talk about, as a CEO, are you paying attention to the mental health and well-being of your people? Or are you just focused on your shareholders? Or, for a nonprofit, you're just focused on your mission. So we've seen a lot of that, Gelareh. We've seen organizations where leaders only care about or seem to care about their mission to clients or their whatever. And when you look down the organization, what you see is a workforce that feels increasingly demoralized because it feels like the leader's focused up here. What's going on down here doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter whether it's things like work-life balance, it's decent compensation, it's challenges, it's recognizing even if you're a small organization, you really have to pay attention to how can I create career progression opportunities? How can I give people opportunities to grow and thrive? Or recognize that you can only do so much and your job is to help also prepare them for their next career move. So that's the real difference, Gelareh. It's, are you intentional about unlocking the potential of your people, or are you just seeing your people as widgets or, machinery in the factory that produce something at the end? That's two very different ways of looking at both the organization and the people who are part of that organization.
Do you help them from diagnosis to see what the problem is until the implementation? So how do you help in this process?
Right. Great question, Gelareh. And it's exactly that. We start with understanding the environment in which they operate. So when we go into an organization, we do a fair amount of audit work initially to work with staff, work with leadership, and really understand those questions, really try to dig into, so what is the current state of the organization? What's the current culture? What are the norms, the processes, the values that you hold as an organization? Do your people understand those? Do they buy into them? Do they even line up with what you claim you're trying to do? So we really go through that kind of deep dive process first to understand the baseline, the current state, and diagnose from there what is working well, what isn't working well. And then we work with the organization to come up with an implementation plan to make changes. And the thing I want to say too is, at least for us, every client, every organization is unique. So we're not, some consultancies are criticized because they basically go in, they have a cookie cutter, they do the same thing for the same group every time, and they already know the outcome. We take a different approach in saying no two organizations are exactly alike. And the critical thing is to contextualize the issues within the organization itself. I mean, sure, we want to aim for unsticking and reaching certain points, but we don't believe that every organization needs the same fixes or the same treatment. So it's a very particularized, very tailored approach that we take.
Are you looking also at the external element of what they're delivering to market and the value creation they're creating to market so that there is a synergy between the two?
We'll often interview stakeholders, whether it's a nonprofit, it's a for-profit, whatever. We'll interview stakeholders to get their perception of what they see as the organization. Do they feel like the value is being created? They feel like do they understand the values, the brand values, the organizational values? Do those translate through? Do they have a sense that the organization is really achieving? Are there reputational risks that are coming up through that process? So we very often try to look at that 360 environment to really understand top to bottom, side to side, what's going on and where is it creating misalignment or issues that are really standing in the way of that organization doing what it wants to do.
In what stage this company should come to you? For example, we have a company they are working on a sustainable product. At what stage they have to come to you and how many employees they need to have to come to you? So if they have 5 employees, is it okay they come to you and ask for your help or no? In what stage they come to you and ask for your help?
When they have a problem, they don't come when things are running well and they want to do a health checkup. They usually come because there's been some serious event happen in the organization. We love them to come when they're thinking intentionally about how can we do, so when they're in a planning process, they're in a thinking process, that's when we'd love them to come to us to say, here's what we're thinking. Here's what's prompted us to go through this reflection exercise. Can you help us take a look? Can you bring in an external set of eyes? That would be great. Most times it's, oh my God, we've got a real problem. Actually, we needed help a week ago, but can you guys come in and fix the problem yesterday? That's not an uncommon experience. As far as the size, Gelareh, it really depends. It's an interesting question I get a lot. What size organization do you work with? My answer is there is no perfect sweet spot size because a lot of it comes down to what an organization values and is willing to pay for. So I've seen larger organizations that say, wow, I thought that would cost me a couple of $1,000. And I'm talking about organizations with $30 or $40 million in revenue that can afford a process, right? I've seen small organizations that say, you know what? I don't care how much this costs. I need this done. And I need it now. Your question is, would 5 employees be okay? Maybe. It depends on the context. Usually you want a bit bigger organization, 5 people, that's, so small. If you can't all sit in a room and work out your issues, you probably have bigger problems, right? So optimally you want 20, 50, 100, 200 employees where you've really got a deep organizational structure. But again, it's really hard in this business to ever say definitively that size is wrong, that size is right. It really, as I've said before, it's contextual. It's understanding what's going on and whether we think we can offer support to that organization.
So if you want to give the recommendation for businesses, and say that if you've seen these symptoms, please call someone like us. What are those symptoms that they have to call you before something major happens?
Well, those are great questions, Gelareh, and I'll give a few. I mean, there's probably an exhaustive laundry list, but some triggers would be, are you seeing prevalence of stress and burnout? Are you seeing days lost due to mental health issues? Do you have a sense that productivity is declining? Are you bleeding talent? Are you having significant trouble hiring people? May or may not be an indicator of something. Do you feel as an executive team that you have a great vision and you can't get your people aligned behind you to execute?
The question that comes to my head, it keeps circling my head. I'm like, I hear what John's saying. Hey, look at those small, nimble startups. Hey, they have great culture. They have that element. What I'm thinking and what I see out there is I see these great startups that all of a sudden have explosive growth and they lose their element. They lose that cultural divide. It kind of the divide in the culture starts to separate because they're going from that nimble size of an operation to now a larger organization, what we call scale up in a way, and they're scaling up into these things. And I see the challenges that could go along with that. And what John's saying here, I can see the diversity, the culture and the diversity, the change in the organization, the change in the way they deliver their product and their offering. And I'm wondering on this element, John, is this the stage where you best can help them? Because that's where I think where the biggest challenges are.
Absolutely, Dave. And it's interesting you talk about private sector startups, because what we've observed is this is actually a universal problem. We've also worked with nonprofit organizations that have experienced explosive growth. And the leader has been largely focused on the growth story, not realizing that the organizational infrastructure and the people not only haven't caught up, there is a huge gap between what they're trying to do and what they can actually deliver at that point. So we've had to go in, and it's often when we're called in because of that problem, the leader's saying, okay, things are breaking down. I can't get this done, or my people are burning out, or my finance department isn't delivering, and I'm hearing nothing but complaints from the rest of my team that they're not getting what they need. Well, you know what? Let's strip away the first layers of the onion, because what we're going to find out is that this isn't just in one part of your organization, it's across the board. You have grown way too fast, and you hadn't paid attention to the fact that you need the people along with the systems and the processes to support that growth. Mr. CEO, Ms. CEO, talk about what you're going to have to do to get there. And the other part of it, guys, is it's not just what happens with the internal culture necessarily. It's also how that opens up the huge potential for risk and serious, and I mean serious catastrophic risk events to happen, because all of a sudden you're growing like stink, your systems aren't caught up, your processes aren't caught up, you're taking on all this stuff and often not thoroughly analyzing, doing the due diligence to understand what it's going to take, and boom, there's a serious risk. That happened to us. We did a project with an organization that had gone through that exact problem and had a couple of catastrophic events happen that ended up in the media, and the next thing you know, we're being called in to say, well, we've got a serious problem here. And part of the problem was huge growth, not enough attention to the infrastructure and the people and the culture to support it.
But don't you think that this is very common? Because so when you're a startup, you put all your effort to get client customers, and then you build your brand, and then you will receive a lot of customers. And before that one, you didn't have resource, money, time to build infrastructure. And then when you have the money, then customers is coming, and you don't have time to build the infrastructure again. That would cause a lot of problems constantly, because now you just dealing with chaos and responding to problems rather than building the infrastructure because you're in the growth stage. So what is your recommendation now?
Well, my recommendation, Gelareh, is number one, that is the common problem for any founder, any startup organization, right? That's not unique, and it's the nature of the beast. What I would say, though, is as a leader, you have to at some point recognize and have the courage and the confidence to recognize that it is good value for your customers, for your business, for your investors to take a step back, take a look at how your organization is working, and see if there are things you can do differently. So, it's pretty common. People say, I've got cost pressures here, and here. Spending money on these kind of discretionary, nice to have services, I can't make the numbers work. But you know what? At some point, it's like avoiding maintenance on your car. If you don't do it at some point, the thing breaks down, and then the cost to fix it is even worse. So my message to any leader in that position is sometimes that ounce of prevention the ounce of prevention is a pound of cure. A little bit of spending now on a process to look at how well you're doing can save you a lot of money, a lot of time, and a lot of potential loss in the market if you do it now rather than waiting until things do blow apart. And I would say it's particularly critical now, given the huge problems that we have with recruitment and retention of employees. And again, it's a problem that is universal. It doesn't matter whether you're a startup in the tech sector, a for-profit, a nonprofit, everyone is having the same problem.
Yeah, I think it comes down to I always think of the rule of three: 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. You've got 1/3 to the current market, 1/3 to the future market, and 1/3 to the operations and the structure of your people. Because nowadays, we're seeing a lot of this element of human-centered design in our organization. Not only human-centered design in the UX and UI we deliver in the products and services we have out there, but how are we actually integrating that into our organization? And actually, like you're saying, John, I love what you're saying about this element, is that people that are inspired and excited to do what they're doing, and they're inspired by what they're doing, they're part of the goal of that organization.
Absolutely, David, because you have to remember who's selling your product, who's talking to your customers, who's delivering your financial reports to you and your investors. Guess what? It's people. Those people aren't excited about what they're doing. Your customers are going to pick that up right away. I mean, we've all had an experience of talking to someone on a phone at a call center and feeling like, wow, this is not a great experience. If this is the way the company is, if this is the ethos the company breeds with these folks as the front line ambassadors for the business, wow, you got to wonder what's going on internally, right? You really have to wonder why you would leave yourself so vulnerable when we have so much consumer choice in so many markets right now. So it is critical to get that piece right. It is critical to recognize, like I said earlier, you can have a great widget, but unless you're selling it through robots, unless you've got AI to market your thing and do all your work, like you got to have people to do the work for you. And people have a lot of choice right now with the state of unemployment.
Yeah, I love it. And the exposure that you have now, that you as an organization are so exposed, like social media and all these elements, people see your voice real quickly and determine their choices pretty quickly.
Absolutely. And if you've got a problem, it boils out. I mean, look right now what's going on with Twitter, right? You've got Twitter employees leaking left, right, and center, talking about what's going on internally. Elon Musk is getting beaten left, right, and center in the media over everything, from advertisers fleeing to staff fleeing to reputational issues. How long is it before the investors start to say, maybe this isn't quite working the way we thought it would, right? And all of a sudden, a competitor emerges, and that $44 billion starts to look like a way, way too expensive price tag for this thing. Because, you go in and here's the chainsaw to cut all these people out because, hey, I can run this thing with 2 robots and 10 people. Yeah, well, you know what? As you said, Dave, people do pay attention to social media and it moves fast. You want to think very consciously about, do you want that to happen?
Some things that it's based on my experience is they have money and they want the CEO, the leader, wants to have changes. But then because the shortage of staff and that the staffs are really have to work too much actually, they don't want that change now. Just like, leave me alone. I just want to finish my tasks. I think that body sometimes resist for this change. Even the body thinks that it's good for them in the future. But right now, you don't get it. I'm dealing with chaos. We're dealing with a lot of work. So how you can convince those body employees to listen to you?
Gelareh, I need to send you the article I was mentioning a few minutes ago because it talks profoundly about this whole issue. And I think it is the one, and first of all, I'm going to say I don't think I have all the answers. I think it's an emerging story because a lot of what we're talking about is that model that we had pre-COVID, where you came into the office at whatever time and you left at whatever time, and you were just deluged with having to do all these tasks. And what we've learned is that it actually created a perverse outcome. It meant people are doing more things poorly instead of a few things very well. Kind of what I think this article likened to the agrarian or the agricultural model. You're in the field all day, you got to harvest the crops, then you have to do this, and you have to do that, then you have to do the other thing. Meanwhile, your phone's ringing, Twitter's going, Slack's going off, and you're feeling burned out. Versus what we experienced during COVID, which is people are working from home where they can focus. They can generally turn off stuff and deal with 1 or 2 things and deliver them well. So I think there is an emerging conversation now that's being driven heavily by employees who are saying, you know what, that factory model really doesn't work for me. I do need to be able, in fact, I feel greater attraction to the culture and to my organization, what it does, if I'm able to really dig in and I'm able to really focus on doing a few things well and being judged by the results I deliver, rather than the number of hours I sit in a cubicle every day or in an open plan office, whatever it is. That article that I referenced talked about as the hunter-gatherer model. And it said, it was a guy, an anthropologist, who'd looked at some tribes in Kenya and said, it's interesting. You look at how these hunter-gatherer tribes worked. They actually had diets that are far higher in calorie count than we would have thought, but they didn't work nearly as much as these other folks who were mostly agrarian. So interesting difference, right? How does that apply to the modern workplace? And I think where it applies is companies having to start really saying, what is it we're trying to accomplish? What are we trying to deliver? And having people feeling battered on all sides by social media, by texts, by everything, is that really going to deliver what we need? Or is it more a matter of we have to rethink not just how we engage in the workplace, but we also have to rethink, even in a 24/7 environment, the expectations that we create for the customer. And conversely, the limitations we're going to put on customer interaction to say, don't expect just because you send an email or you do something, you're going to get an instant response all the time. You might get it during normal business hours, but don't expect it at 9:00 at night.
Well, and the other thing, what you're saying here, John, is very relevant because we can't operate in a box anymore. Because if we operate in the box, like you said earlier on in our show today, that someone's going to come take your lunch, because we have this world of the innovator's dilemma of all this element of, if we don't pay attention to some areas of our business, someone will find an advantage there and take that from us. And so we need to give these employees the opportunity, because they are the voice of the organization. They're talking to the customer. We need to figure out how we can and give them the space and time to think critically about what's next, because we need to evolve, and we need to evolve quickly, especially because the rise of technology is evolving so fast.
Exactly, Dave. And we're starting to see more and more, employees themselves are saying, look, if you want me to come back and spend 5 days a week in an office in a cubicle, forget it. I'm not interested. I don't mind coming in to drop in for meetings, have some social interaction with the team, have a stand-up, any of that stuff. That's fine. But otherwise, if I can't spend time at home, digging into my work, really doing it well, and then engage, come in when I need to, you know what? There are other employers out there. There are other businesses out there that value the same things I do, see the world the same way I do. I'm going to take my talent and my skills and I'm going to go work for them. I don't think we've settled it. There's lots of, as we've seen, there's lots of employers who are all over the map trying to understand, well, how, especially older employers, how come these people don't want to just be in an office? Don't they understand that's the way things are done, right? And I think we're really going to have an interesting and very tough conversation over the next couple of years as companies, as businesses, employers, leaders really have to dig in and think about the fact that the pre-COVID world is gone. It's not coming back. We're in a new era, and we've got to think about how to build and design a future of work that recognizes that the pandemic fundamentally changed a lot of how we perceive our role as people and organizations, and what we value and what we don't value. And I think the companies that survive and thrive are the ones that figure it out more quickly.
John, this has been a very exciting conversation, and I think we could go for a long period of time on this. I think this is just the beginning of the story. I love the article that you suggested. We're going to put that in the notes here of this episode. John, before we let you take off on us, we've got to get a challenge out there. We've got to throw something out there. Is there a macro challenge or that we need to think as a big community, or is there a micro challenge you're facing with your organization that we can try and help solve, put some ideas in front of our students for them to start thinking about?
Yeah, that's great, Dave. I'm going to put 2 challenges out advisedly. The first one I'm going to put out is to individuals who work in organizations. If you think your organization allows it, have the courage to stand up and ask these very questions. What are we doing to create an organizational culture where we can all thrive, we can all have joy in our work, and we can drive the performance that stands us out amongst our competitors in the communities in which we operate? And I'm going to say the same thing to the CEOs of the world. My challenge to all of you is take a hard look at what you're doing internally. Sit down with your people, open up a dialogue where there's no retribution, there's no fear. Give everyone space to tell you bluntly and candidly what's working well, what's not working well. Take that feedback on board. Figure out what you need to do to change, because if you don't, you are going to be facing the same problem, people leaving, people demoralized. So get on top of it now. That's my challenge to the leadership.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, John. That was another episode of Innovation Fuel. Thank you for listening to Innovation Fuel. We are on all podcast streaming platforms, Google, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.
Visit our website at www.ucanwest.ca/Innovation Fuel. Also, follow us on Instagram at innovation_fuel.